Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Joel Kotkin's nonfiction work, The Coming of Neo-Feudalism. I'll talk briefly about the author, go into an overview of what the book is, talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and finish off with who I'd recommend the book to and what I'll be reading for next time. I don't have a cover. I read this on ebook, but The Coming of Neo-Feudalism is a 2020 book by Joel Kotkin, who is a writer, writes for Forbes, and has written for the Daily Beast. He lives in Orange County, California, and I believe he teaches or has a fellowship at Chapman University. He's written several books. He kind of writes about trends in the United States as well as around the world. And this is the first of his stuff that I've read. But The Coming of Neo-Feudalism, is about the idea that there will be a return to what we typically refer to as the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, with very stratified components of society, with a very, very, very small upper class of people, and people kind of between those people and what used to be the middle class will now kind of be the working poor, or the poor is what his argument is. So it'll be returned to that kind of very stratified society. He gives into a little bit of a background of what feudalism was originally, why some people have romantic views of that, and why overall it is not something to admire or want to return to. And then he goes into a kind of review of the world as he sees it. And basically, the main argument of the book is that autocratic governments, authoritarian governments, are using high-tech tools produced in Silicon Valley primarily in order to squash dissent, not only in the United States but around the world, and that complicit in this are the tech companies, the people who run the tech companies specifically, and what he calls I think it's the selecracy, but it's basically a term for any people with influence or power. So these would be media, people in the media, people who are thought leaders, things of that nature. And so I thought it's actually a really compelling book, and I think he did a very, very good job of researching it. I think the one thing I liked about it was very global. It does take a look at areas, basically showing these trends not only in the U.S. but also around the world, as far as kind of a diminishing middle class, and how these tools are being used in some ways against people, especially in China. He has a lot in China about the surveillance state and how that can really be used as a tool to delay or eliminate any kind of possible political reform, and how he sees that kind of warning signs of that here in the United States. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was really well researched. It is kind of a scary book in that sense of just kind of showing the regression of the middle class and the working class of people. There were some statistics in there that I thought were really interesting. Basically, he describes the kind of gross sales per employee and just shows how tech companies are on just another level as far as that goes, even compared to older, what we would call technology companies like Intel, because they had physical components to them. They needed more physical bodies, and companies like Facebook and Google really do not. And how the tech companies, if you add up, I think it's their value, maybe it's their yearly gross income, but it's basically equal to France. And so if you add up like the big 4 or 5 tech companies, they have like a market cap equal to France, which is pretty insane. So that was really interesting. I think on the downside, the only things that I didn't like or enjoy as much, there's a couple of things that kind of felt tacked on. He has kind of certain sections about how people who are the 0.01% have the system set up in a way to benefit them. He does go on kind of tangents a little bit towards the end of some of those chapters. He has a bit on transhumanism that I thought wasn't necessary for the book, just because it is so experimental and such a strange science fiction idea at this point in time. and it's really hard to determine how serious people are taking it. So I felt that wasn't necessarily needed. He also, for someone who wants to espouse on the necessity of a kind of what we used to call the blue collar class of people, he really is down on environmentalism, and he seems to really kind of push, not necessarily that man-made climate change isn't a thing, but he seems to be really tolerant of the idea that maybe the science isn't completely on board or in consensus with that. That kind of irked me a little bit, and I think that if you were to make an argument that where you did need a large group of people who were skilled at non-computer-based skill sets, I think actually having millions and millions of workers as wind techs and as installers of solar panels actually makes a lot of sense. And so that kind of bothered me a little bit. And some of his sources for that I thought were a little questionable. But overall, I enjoyed the book. I wish there was maybe more at the end there about practical steps that we could take, and probably more along the lines of what is a practical guide to kind of resisting moving in this direction that I didn't think was quite there. But I think this book, if you liked things like White Shift, if you liked even Dream Cities, I thought overlapped in some places with this, because he talks a lot about in the future there are, and this I thought was really an interesting idea, kind of the push away from the formation of the family and the push towards people being kind of single and childless, fitting in well with the idea of a gentrified city, of having basically like closet-sized apartments. Made a lot of sense for his argument, and it's not something I considered really much before. But I thought that overall the book is really well researched, and I think a lot of the books that I've reviewed in this channel kind of overlap slightly with this. And so if you're a fan, if you've read and liked Dream Cities, and I'll leave a link for these below, Dream Cities or White Shift, I thought that this would fit in well with that. So this book was the Coming of Neo-Feudalism by Joel Kotkin. Next time I'm going to review Hyperion by Dan Simmons. I will review that. Till next time, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Till next time, bye.